But there's a couple of other things also here, a factor in addition to the cost per click, and that's your conversion, right? So how is your conversion doing? So if you are converting well, then the cost is not as important. So that's one. The other thing is you have the external traffic that you can drive to your listing. So I'm always suspicious of selling through the website. Now with Buy with Prime, that's a different story, because now you're not in fulfillment business. Because I always say this, especially if you're launching for the first time, it makes no sense to sell through your website, because there are so many unknowns that you're gonna have to learn in terms of launching, your keyword strategy, your replenishment, which is the most important, being able to project your inventory. When you start scaling, that becomes a challenge. And if you run out of, you're dead in the water, right? So there's so many things to learn about. Why would you want to also add to this workload fulfillment, customer service, returns, refunds, and all that stuff? Not to mention, that is the best case scenario, because that implies that you're driving traffic to your website and converting well, and your customer acquisition cost is acceptable, which is usually not the case in the early days, at least. So that's why I always say at the beginning, focus on Amazon, and then by all means put up your website, but use it as a brochure, and building a mailing list, building a following, so that way you can following to drive traffic to your Amazon listing. Once you get to the point where you say, okay, I'm doing fine with Amazon, I can handle something else. Now with Buy with Prime, you can still launch your website, but still be out of the fulfillment business. But you still have the customer acquisition cost. So you're telling me that you can cost effectively drive traffic to your website and acquire
No,
customers?
exactly. What I'm telling you is 12 to 18, sorry, let's say 18 to 24 months ago, if you were going to start an e-commerce business, you would probably make a zero-sum game decision around whether or not to build that business on Amazon or on Shopify. And you would try to get really, really good at maximizing the unit economics of the one channel. If you thought you were well positioned to be an Amazon-only business, you would launch only via FBA, you would master Amazon PPC and keywords, and you would do that. If you thought you were a business that needed to really build a deep relationship with your customer, was maybe a subscription business, was maybe a venture-backed business where you're going to raise capital, you would probably launch only on Shopify to try to own the customer information, try to, in theory, right, enjoy the the better unit economics if you could advertise profitably of not having Amazon's FBA fee. And regardless of which channel you chose, you would probably only grow in that channel for several years, right? Most of the last generation's great brands were Amazon or Shopify only, up to many, many millions of dollars. And then they launched on a marketplace or launched their own website. What I'm saying today is I would advise getting on both channels as quickly as possible. I think unless you sell a very premium product, I think the idea of folks going direct to consumer only and eschewing the opportunity on Amazon or other marketplaces is insane. By the same metric, I think FBA sellers, unless you're really, really running only a private label arbitrage, I think the idea of FBA sellers not throwing up a basic Shopify storefront the day that they launch their FBA business is kind of crazy. To your point, just launching a Shopify storefront is a lot easier than building out the entire 3PL and logistics infrastructure to go with it. So the way that I think about it is you have your sort of Amazon storefront, you have your Shopify storefront, but even very early on in the process, when it comes to growth, I think even very early stage sellers should be a lot more nimble in thinking about using both Amazon PPC and offsite traffic as a lever. Now that it can be fulfilled with Buy with Prime, or you can run like Amazon attribution affiliate links and get the 10% brand referral bonus back from Amazon, which by the way isn't going to last forever. Amazon's not going to pay brands 10% in perpetuity for traffic, but they are right now. So you know, depending on the business, no, I'm probably not advocating if you're running a, you know, reasonably low AOV product that is Amazon first. No, I'm probably saying it's not worth spending a dime on Facebook to drive sales via your direct consumer site. But I do think it's worth investing in offsite channels, whether it's with the Buy with Prime integration or whether it's with you know, offsite Amazon attribution links. Because again, the number of categories where there's still arbitrage in being Amazon only is lower and lower by the day, and I don't see this trend reversing. I don't think it's a bad thing, by the way. Like, some people think it's a lot harder to launch a brand now than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And again, take this with a grain of salt, right? I operated a portfolio of mature brands, and my job was all of our off Amazon growth, by the way. So I come from a very like that specific point of view. I ran the, you know, the part of our business that was responsible for growth and affiliates and direct consumer and other marketplaces. And now I, you know, run a software business. I don't operate a small brand. But I don't necessarily think it's harder than it was 3 or 4 years ago to win. It's just a different playbook. 3 or 4 years ago, it was about getting really, really good at mastering one distribution channel and dealing with a slightly more nascent infrastructure of software and logistics providers. Now, the software and logistics providers are exceptional, right? The like nuts and bolts of building an e-commerce business are a lot easier, but the cost of customer acquisition has gone up a ton. So you have to be, you know, a little bit more nimble and willing to kind of win on multiple platforms. So that's the thesis. I think reasonable people can disagree with me, right? I'm sure there will still be some great brands built this decade that do it only on Amazon and maybe add a direct consumer component several years down the line. But like, if I'm just looking at kind of the customers we have on Brandable that launched in the last couple of years versus the more established businesses, most of these companies had both an Amazon storefront and a fairly sophisticated direct consumer operation, even if they weren't spending money against it.